Parshas Vayeishev, who sold Yosef. In Bereshis, Perek Lamed Zayin, when Yosef was 17 years old, he had various dreams which he told his family about, and his brothers did not seem so happy to hear about his dreams. One day, Yosef's brothers were in Shechem, and Yaakov sent Yosef to see how they were doing, and Yosef found his brothers in Dosan. When the brothers saw him coming, they conspired to kill him. Someone suggested killing him and putting him in a pit. Reuven convinced them just to leave him in the pit and not kill him. He had intended to come back and save him later. They took off his kosones pasim, his coat of many colours, and cast him in a pit. Then they sat down to eat a meal, and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilad in the distance. Then Yehuda said to his brothers, "Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites." And in Bereshis Lamed Zayin Kafches, we read the following. Vayavru anoshim midyonim socharim, Midianite traders passed by, vayimshechu vaya'alu es Yosef min haba'ar, and they pulled out Yosef from the pit. Vayimkaru es Yosef layishmaelim be'esrim kesef, and they sold Yosef for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites. Vayoviu es Yosef mitzrayma, and they brought Yosef down to Egypt. Now, apart from the Midianites who were passing by at the beginning, all the rest of the verbs, it's very difficult to understand who the subject is in the verb. For example, who pulled Yosef out of the pit? Who sold Yosef? And who brought him down to Egypt? Rashi tells us that there was more than one caravan of camels coming past, the Ishmaelites and the Midianites and another Ishmaelite caravan. And he tells us, V'hodi'acha hakosov, the Torah makes us to understand, Shenimkar pa'omim harbeh, that Yosef was sold multiple times. Rashi then quotes the Medrash Tanchuma 1:9, and he says, it was Bnei Yaakov who took Yosef from the pit, Vayim karuhu la Yishmaelim, and they sold Yosef to the Ishmaelim. The Ishmaelim la Midyonim, and the Ishmaelites sold Yosef to the Midianites, Vaha Midyonim la Mitzrayim, and the Midianites sold Yosef to Egypt. The Rashbam, who is Rashi's grandson, his name is Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir, and he passed away in 1158 in Troyes in France, has a completely different understanding of what happens. And he says, whilst the brothers had sat at some distance to consume their meal, we're assuming maybe they could hear the cries of Yosef saying, "Save me, save me." They wanted to distance themselves from the pit where they'd put Yosef. They were waiting for the Ishmaelites, who they'd seen in the distance, to arrive. During this time, the Midianites came from a different direction, and they saw Yosef in the pit, pulled him up, and proceeded to sell him to the Ishmaelites. So the Midyanim sold him to the Ishmaelites. One may assume that the brothers had no knowledge of this, even though later on the Torah appears to attribute the sale of Yosef to the Ishmaelites, to the brothers, based on the fact that Yosef himself accuses his brothers as having sold him. So that would be in Bereshis, Perek Mem Hey, Posuk Vov, Posuk Dalad, where Yosef says, "Vayomer ani Yosef achichem," and Yosef says, "I am Yosef, your brother, Asher makartem osi mitzrayma, which you sold me down to Egypt." Now, how does Rashbam understand that? He says it is the brothers who are, so to speak, indirectly at fault here because they put him into the pit. They were instrumental about bringing about the sale. So Yosef said, "It's you who were instrumental in selling me down to Egypt." If you accept Rashbam's theory, what can we learn about the sale of Yosef? Rabbi David Foreman from Aleph Beta suggests, if you follow the way that Rashbam understands the story, that it wasn't the brothers who sold Yosef directly, we can't accuse the brothers of selling Yosef, but they did create the conditions that in the end made Yosef get sold. They didn't actually sell him. The Midianites did that, and the Ishmaelites then sold him on to Egypt. But the brothers were indirectly responsible. When the brothers come back to their father and they say to Yaakov, "We have no idea what happened to Yosef," it is basically partially true. They didn't know what happened to him. But Even though they didn't know, at some level they were responsible for what happened to him, as they created the conditions that indirectly set in chain the motion of events that made Yosef get sold to Egypt. I want to ask you, what would have happened had Yosef not been found by the Midianite traders who sold him off to the Ishmaelim, who sold him on to Egypt? Think about the stages of the plans. The first thing that happened when they saw Yosef is someone suggests, let's kill Yosef and throw his body into a pit. Reuven intervenes and he says, no, let's throw him alive into the pit, which is a slightly less extreme plan than killing him and throwing his body into a pit. And Reuven had every intention to come back and check on him and get him out when the brothers were a bit more calm. Later, Yosef suggests selling Yosef. Yehuda suggests selling Yosef. So that's like another downgrade, another less severe idea of what they're going to do with their brother. We can see that people, the protagonists in the story, made Yosef's fate less bad. Now, what made them downgrade their attack on Yosef? I think it is time. Time has elapsed, and as time elapses, you get to think a little bit more. The brothers' initial impulse to kill Yosef becomes less and less severe. What would have happened if more time had gone by and the Midianite traders did not come past? What would have happened if the brothers had more time to think? Time can help us a lot if a person is impulsive. A person has to be very careful that if they get angry, shouldn't really get angry, a person should not do something which is irreversible. Time can heal wounds, but we are not always given the luxury of time. A person needs to think very carefully about what they do in the heat of a moment, especially if they've ascended what we call proverbially, they've ascended anger mountain. The whole course of history of the Bnei Israel could have been drastically different if the brothers were given more time. Let's take the lesson of what happened to Yosef and what could happen in our own lives if we do something that's irreversible in the heat of the moment. Good Shabbos.